Welcome, English language teachers, to another session of The Explainer. Now, today we're doing something just a little bit different. We're actually turning this explainer into a professional development workshop. Think of it as a practical masterclass right here on your screen. We're tackling a massive, absolutely crucial topic: critical thinking in productive skills. We're going to look at how we can fundamentally elevate our students' output in speaking and writing, really transforming them from passive learners into active critical communicators. Okay, let's dive into this. The central challenge we face every single day in the classroom is pushing our students beyond basic comprehension. I mean, you know the trap, right? We want to move our classrooms away from that repetitive textbook, read cycle. Our goal is to guide them toward authentic, thoughtful communication where they aren't just parroting information back to us, but actively processing and creating it themselves. So, here is our roadmap for the session today. Number 1, beyond basic comprehension. 2, generating ideas with constraints. 3, setting criteria for success. 4, evaluating student success. And finally, number 5, building critical thinking habits. Section 1, beyond basic comprehension. True critical discourse actually requires students to turn their reflective analysis inward. You see, it's not just about critiquing an article they've read, it's about rigorously evaluating their own thoughts and language before they even articulate them to the outside world. And this all starts with phase 1, idea generation. Before any student can evaluate their output, they need to actually generate thoughtful content. But as educators, we know a blank page is literally terrifying for language learners. So we have to give them the precise tools to spark that initial creation. Section 2, generating ideas with constraints. We often assume that if we want students to produce rich, creative writing or speech, we need to give them a completely blank slate, unlimited freedom. We say, write about anything. But in reality, unlimited freedom usually leads to complete paralysis. Actually, it's kind of a paradox, and this quote perfectly captures the solution. Constraints force creativity. Too much freedom stifles it. Setting strict limitations is exactly how we improve creative output. By narrowing the focus and giving them a specific box to think inside of, we remove that overwhelming burden of infinite choice. This frees up the students' cognitive load to focus on the actual quality of their language and their critical thought. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly it illustrates this concept. This is Pixar's 6-line story structure, and it's a phenomenal example of how a tightly constrained framework unlocks brilliant original ideas. By giving students these exact sentence starters, you provide the structural scaffolding. They don't have to invent a narrative arc entirely from scratch. They just have to focus on filling those constraints with engaging, critical details. And those constraints definitely don't stop at storytelling. Take a mental screenshot of these two frameworks to keep in your pedagogical toolkit for tomorrow's lesson. First, we have the multiple perspectives approach. This forces students to view a single topic from very specific angles, like, say, examining a new piece of technology strictly through a financial lens, and then through an emotional lens. Second, there's the journalistic framework. The classic who, what, when, where, why, and how. These aren't just reading comprehension tools, folks. They are hard boundaries that practically force comprehensive idea generation for speaking and writing tasks. So having a great idea is really only step 1. Now we shift gears into phase 2, criteria setting. This is where we shift from generating those ideas to establishing the clear boundaries for a successful task. Section 3, setting criteria for success. Critical discourse absolutely demands a structured approach to quality. We have to establish clear criteria for evaluation before, during, and after production. And this brilliantly illustrates a core part of that criteria, this fundamental principle. Good critical writing always keeps the future audience in mind. Student output must be entirely audience-centered. They shouldn't just be writing to satisfy you, the teacher, or to, hit a random word count. They must envision a specific future consumer of their message. To make this concept actionable, let's look at these audience analysis questions. This is a highly practical checklist that I strongly urge you to literally write on the board before any major writing or speaking assignment. Having students stop and ask themselves, what does my audience already know? Or will they actually agree with my points? It forces them to step outside their own egos and tailor their arguments critically and empathetically. Once they know their audience, they've got to clarify their aims. We need to remind our students that they must distinguish between the basic task requirements, like write a 3-minute speech, and their actual, deeper communicative aims. What's the point? Are they trying to correct a stereotype? Are they aiming to explain historical context or maybe challenge a broad generalization? Pinpointing this precise outcome dictates their entire approach. And when it comes to the methods of achieving those aims, we have to teach conciseness. Here is the progressive reduction funnel. It is an incredible, immediate classroom exercise. Have your students write a full paragraph expressing their main argument. Then force them to edit it down to just 3 lines. After that, summarize it in one single sentence. Finally, reduce the whole shebang to a 6-word headline. It teaches relevance filtering and forces them to decide what is truly, absolutely essential. Let's take a quick visual breath here as we transition into Phase 3, evaluating success. We are moving from the messy, creative act of creation to the precise act of reflection. Section 4, evaluating student success. What we really want to foster is autonomous assessment, where students critically assess their own output before you, the teacher, ever pick up a red pen. This autonomous assessment is driven by asking themselves this fundamental rhetorical question: have I achieved what I set out to do? By returning to those pre-established criteria we just discussed, their aims, their audience, and their methods, students basically mirror the rigorous self-inquiry we want them performing on every single first and final draft they produce. Section 5. Building critical thinking habits. It is absolutely vital to stress that these strategies, the constraints, the audience analysis, the progressive reduction, these are not meant to be one-off tricks you just use on a random Tuesday. Developing the specific habit of mind is what ultimately creates truly independent learners. It requires the consistent application of these structured frameworks. It requires regular self-questioning, a genuine willingness to revise based on that self-assessment, and constantly finding that sweet spot, the balance between strict structure and dynamic creativity. I want to conclude today's explainer by provocatively turning the methodology right back on you, using a 3-2-1 self-assessment. Based on our workshop today, what are 3 things you learned? What are 2 things you want to learn more about? And what is 1 question you still have? But most importantly, how will you take these constraints and criteria and apply them in your language classroom tomorrow? Think critically about that. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next explainer.